Several years ago, I learned a new campfire game called Unpopular Opinions. Now, the goal of this game is for each person to come up with an opinion that they actually hold about anything, but that they think the rest of the group will disagree with. So things like cilantro tastes like soap, or classical music is boring, or cream in coffee is an abomination. Can you guess which one I actually believe? Now think low stakes, right? But controversial. The more unpopular your opinion is, the more successful you are at this game. It is basically the opposite of how we usually build community, which is to connect on those things we have in common. The point of this game was conflict, finding the parts of ourselves that are in tension with others. Now, in some ways, it was a very fun game. There was definitely a lot of laughter around that campfire. But in other ways, it made me so nervous. I wondered, what if my opinion was too controversial? What if others judged me based on the opinions I shared? Even in game form, the tension of conflict can feel scary. We are so programmed to think of conflict and tension as negative, something to be fixed or managed. So our first hope is to avoid it altogether. Just don't say that unpopular opinion. Or say it and then leave the conversation so you don't have to see what the reaction will be. Maybe you avoid certain topics altogether, knowing that they will only elicit conflict with a particular person or group. Or maybe you hold inside the way that a person or community has hurt you because you don't want to rock the boat. Now, the problem with all of this avoidance is that it doesn't actually fix anything. It only isolates us. Avoiding tension, it turns out, doesn't make the tension go away. It just means we end up trying to hold it alone. And holding tension alone isn't good for any of us. Imagine what would have happened in the tug of friendship if one person had tried to hold on alone. You saw Sadie try a little bit. Think about it. What if, when everyone had tried to stand up, one person had held on and everyone else let go? They would have tipped right over. You literally cannot hold tension alone without hurting yourself in the process. I wonder if any of you have been in a gathering or meeting or group conversation where someone said something that just felt icky. Have you ever had that experience? Maybe they were just being careless with their words. We all make mistakes. Maybe they didn't realize that what they said might cause offense. Or maybe they were being intentionally provocative. Whatever the situation may be, someone says something that builds tension in the room. Have you been in a space like that? Where you can feel the tension building up around you, dark, viscous, and thick, or red-spined and prickly, as Rosemary Watola Tromer puts it. And you wonder, is anyone going to say something? Should I say something? Meanwhile, your body begins to tighten with knots in your shoulders or your stomach, that visceral response to the emotional reality, the effects of your body trying to hold on to this tension alone. Maybe you feel like you're going to tip right over. And it never feels good. If you're lucky, someone, maybe you, has the courage to name that tension. I am noticing, they might say, or that didn't feel good to me. Can we talk about it? And all of a sudden, in that naming, the tension is a little bit easier to hold, right? Because in that moment, you are no longer trying to hold it alone. You don't have to sit and wonder if anyone else noticed or feels the same way you do. The tension doesn't go away. In fact, there are some ways in which naming tension makes it build. But the isolation is gone, and the holding of that tension is no longer yours alone. Tension held alone can be debilitating, but when we hold it together, it becomes productive. It can become productive, even transformative. Holding tension together actually helps hold you upright. When everyone held on to that rope together, it was easier for them all to stand, right? This is one of the things that we aspire to do in this community, to be a place where we can bring those tensions to one another, to name the differences among us and use the tensions that arise as opportunities to grow, to be a place where we can bring the tensions of our lives and find others to hold them alongside us, to be a place where we can bring the tensions of this world and wrestle with the complexity and despair of this time together. We aspire to be that safe place to land, not a place that is devoid of tension, but a place where we practice holding it together, where we know that we will not be left to hold it alone, where we know that no one's going to let go of that rope, where we can be partners in the work of wrestling and naming and healing. This, at its heart, is what covenant is all about. In our Unitarian Universalist context, a covenant is an agreement that we make with one another about how we want to be with one another and how we want to be out in the world. Covenants are always aspirational, meaning that they are reminders of who we want to be, with the clear recognition that we do not always live up to those aspirations. We are human, right? In that way, covenants are made to be broken and remade again and again and again. And more than anything else, they give us guidance on how to hold tension and conflict with care. Now, in our congregation, a number of our smaller groups have their own covenants, and we have a congregational covenant that is for all of us. It's been a while since we've said the words of our evolving covenant of right relationship in worship, so I thought I'd share them today. I hope that it sounds familiar to many of you. It goes like this. Our church is a unique community where we aspire to personal and spiritual growth and to learning new ways of being in relation to one another. Mindful of your inherent worth and dignity, I do covenant to bring my best self to this place, listen intently, speak honestly and thoughtfully, trust in your good intentions, and recognize that my actions and words have an impact regardless of my intentions. And when I fall out of covenant, I will ask for help and be open to loving guidance to restore my relationship with you. This covenant is a guide for all of us, a guide for how we can hold that tension together, how we can hold each other as we manage the tensions of the world. It offers a container in which tension can be productive and maybe even transformative. In her book, Transforming Conflict, my colleague, the Reverend Teresa Cooley, offers numerous examples of how covenants have helped congregations move through conflict productively. One of my favorite of these stories is about a congregation that was going through a major building campaign. We know a little bit about that here. She says, this was an old historic church that was being confronted with the dreaded reality. Should they renovate the antique house that had been used as a parsonage, which needed very expensive work, or should they sell it and use the proceeds for other important parts of their ministry? The building had many historical and emotional connections, particularly for the older members of the church, and they were loath to let it go. From the beginning of the process, the minister guided them in establishing a strict covenant for participating in the conversation. In order to speak, congregants had to first light a candle and say what they loved about the congregation. Only then could they state an opinion about the house. This helped remind each person and the group collectively that helping sustain a loving congregation was more important than the details of what they were deciding. Isn't that beautiful? When the congregation eventually voted to sell the building, the intentionality of the process resulted in holding them together rather than driving them apart, despite the real differences of opinion that existed among them. We need these guides, these containers, these covenants if we want to be able to hold tension productively. And when they are absent or not mutually agreed on or someone opts out of it, it can make holding the tension together impossible. Now, there's a lot of talk in our world right now about how to have conversations with people with whom we don't agree. I know that there are people who would say that this is the only way that we can begin to heal our world. And there is some truth in that. We do need to be able to talk to each other. And that's only going to work if these conversations are entered into with some agreements, some sort of covenant. They're only productive if both people, both parties, are committed to each other's well-being, to holding the tension together. And the reality of our world is that some of these conversations we're entering into, that's not true. When talking about political difference is presented as the only way forward, I get nervous. I get nervous because I think there is so much potential for harm in these conversations. Not because conflict is bad or because we shouldn't talk about our differences, but because these conversations don't work unless both parties are equally committed to each other's well-being. You cannot begin to understand each other unless you first decide to care for each other. And it has to be a two-way street. It doesn't matter how deeply I believe in another person's inherent worthiness if they don't believe in mine. And so here's my perhaps unpopular opinion. I'm not interested in having conversations about values with people who have different beliefs than mine unless I already know that they are committed to my well-being and to the well-being of the people I love. And I don't think we need to subject ourselves to listening to other viewpoints unless there is some sort of mutuality in it. Otherwise, we are just tugging on that rope alone, trying to stand while they let go, and we fall back on the ground. We have to be holding on together, caring about each other before we can try to stand together. Last week, when Michael asked how many of you had watched the State of the Union, I was struck by how few said yes. I was struck even though I was among those who skipped it. But I imagine, since I know my own reasoning, that opting out was perhaps also for you an act of self-preservation. That the trauma of hearing our values and our very selves degraded was not worth it. Tuning in would not have been a productive effort at holding the tension, an act of trying to understand the other side. Instead, it would have been like trying to stand up while holding the rope, but you're the only one holding on. You are bound to tip over. One of the reasons we can have conversations in the context of congregational community like this is that we already have a relationship and a commitment to one another. We have a framework. We already know that we care about each other. That's one of the things we agree to by becoming part of this community. We know that when we try to stand, we're all going to keep holding on together, right? We're not going to let go of that rope. I don't know exactly how to translate that into the larger world. I think it's one of the big questions of our time, and I don't know the answer yet. But I do think that the best thing we can do is practice. In this space where we already have a container, we can practice having the hard conversations, naming when we mess up, when we hurt each other, talking about our differences, and I can assure you there is a lot of difference in this room. And sharing the ways that we've been beaten down by the world. And perhaps, with enough practice, we can figure out how to bring these containers elsewhere, how to know when we are holding on together and when we are left on our own. I don't know what it will take to hold the tension of this world with all of our neighbors. But in the meantime, may we continue here to practice holding the tension together, reaching out to one another in love, in a place where we know we will be met, so that we can figure out how we can do that in a bigger way in the future.